Welcome to day 106. We've got 1 Samuel chapters 18, 1 Chronicles chapter 6, Psalm 11, and Matthew 3. We are really jumping around the Bible today. So 1 Samuel 18, we are looking into the story now of David and Jonathan, who is King Saul's son. And this is going to be a little bit of an interesting one. It's going to extend over several chapters. And I want you to pay attention as you're reading, because this is one of those areas that some people think there is a little more diversity in the Bible than some of us may have realized. And so it's a little ambiguous. There's not a lot of details. So there's a lot of people that interpret the relationship between David and Jonathan in different ways. But I just want you to be open as you're reading this to realize that there may be more going on here. So it says that Jonathan loved David as much as himself. It says this again in chapter 20. There's another place that some translations say that David loved Jonathan as much as any woman. And as we read on, you're going to discover David really loved his women a lot and had intimate relationships with many women. Jonathan and David are listed as having made a covenant together. It does not specify what kind of covenant that is. So some people believe that there is a bisexual relationship here. Some people don't want to think about that at all. I'm not saying that there is any clear definition as to what the relationship between Jonathan and David is. It is clear they're very close. It is clear that they do a lot together, that they support each other, that they save each other's lives. But there is room for some people to say that there is perhaps an intimate relationship here as well. And I don't think this makes or breaks anything. And I'm not trying to necessarily make a particular point here other than the fact that the Bible is complex. The Bible does not always include all the details that in our present situation that we would like to have included. And I think that there is the possibility that the Bible is including information that is not as black and white, cut and dry, dualistic, or heteronormative as we sometimes think it is in our current context and situation. So I just suggest as you're reading through the sections with David and Jonathan, just pay attention to see what it's actually saying and be open to the fact that there may be more complexity to their relationship. Which then makes us think, is there space for more complexity in human relationships in our context today? Looking at Chronicles, we have more lists of people and we have lists of priestly cities. I can't say it's terribly interesting, but it continues to lay the groundwork for its worldview of where the kings came from, why they ended up with kings, and how those kings are connected to the overall people of Israel. Psalm 11 is a brief psalm. It talks about how God seeks justice. I think as we go through the Psalms, there's a great variety in the Psalms. There's 150 of them, some very short, some very long, all sorts of different themes. And I think one of the things to really hold on to as we read Psalms is that Psalms are not only telling us about God, they are also showing us how to live with God. They show us how to worship God, how to pray to God, how to see God in our lives, how to cry out to God when you feel that God has abandoned you. There's just, again, rich complexity to the Psalms, and you can't just pigeonhole them into particular boxes. Matthew chapter 3, we are already jumping into the adulthood of Jesus. We start with John the Baptist at work and the work that he was doing, that he was called to do to prepare the way for Jesus. Now, one of the interesting things here is that it seems to become fashionable for people to leave Jerusalem and go out into the wilderness to listen to John the Baptist, or perhaps to put on a show. It could be that some of these people thought that it was entertainment to watch John the Baptist encourage people to find a new way of living life in order to prepare themselves for the Messiah. I think in our time, there are ways that religious practices also become fashionable. There are certain bracelets that become fashionable, certain necklaces, certain types of behaviors that become fashionable. And I think John the Baptist's concern that some people were just showing up because it was the cool thing to do is a problem that we still face in our lives today. I think there's been long periods of American history where people have been part of church communities in order to be seen as respectable, regardless of what their personal beliefs were or what their personal spiritual practices were. And so I think some of John the Baptist's message applies to us today. One thing that he talks about is that we need to be changing our lives, that this isn't just, oh, you know, clock in an hour with God each week and we're fine, but that God actually wants us to be living our lives differently, that God has expectations for how humans live together, how humans engage with all of creation. And once again, there's a reference to dead wood going on the fire. And we see Jesus talk about this when he talks about being the vine and believers are the branches, and that branches that don't produce will be cut off and burned. Jesus also has some times where he talks about fig trees that do not produce and that they will be cut down and burned. This is a metaphor that is referred to several times, and I think it's something that we need to take seriously. That if we don't change our lives, if we are not connected to Jesus and filled with the love and grace of Jesus, the power of Jesus in our lives, and bring that into the relationships with other people, that we will be held accountable. Burning deadwood is a metaphor for accountability. So, are we bearing fruit for God? Is there deadwood in our lives that we need to cut off in order to make room to be able to bear better fruit? And then I always think it's interesting at the end here, Jesus is baptized by John, and John protests. He's like, Jesus, you're Jesus. You're the Son of God. What are you doing coming to me for a baptism? And I think one of the things for us to reflect on here is that Jesus seems frequently to turn to the people around him in order to accomplish the tasks that he has. In this case, he works with John the Baptist in order to become baptized and in order to set the stage for the sacrament of baptism to continue on, that there will be priests, there will be pastors who are leading rituals of baptism as a sacrament of grace, as a means to receive God's grace in our life going forward. And whether it's healing, whether it's going out and looking for people who are lost and alone, Jesus continually looks for ways to be in partnership with people, to be working with people. Jesus doesn't do a whole lot of stuff off on his own. He is engaged with people. And I think it's really easy for us to often think, oh, I can just take care of this myself. But I think we really have to reflect on how Jesus engages with the people around him and then think about the ways we engage. Who do we work with? Who do we avoid? Who do we build teams with so that we can build sustainable ministries that reach more people than we could reach on our own and are more sustainable and more resilient to deal with the ups and downs of life as it comes and goes. So I think that's a real challenge for us is how do we work with others? And of course, that then also brings us back to David and Jonathan is what do we see in other people? What do we learn from other people? Are we open to other opinions, other ways of doing things? What is it that we gain from our relationships with each other instead of just going through life on our own? And it's clear that David and Jonathan were very strong for each other. It's clear that Jesus is constantly reaching out and engaging a wide range of people in his ministries. And I think it's really easy for us to limit stuff and say these people fit and those people don't. And I think all of our Bible readings today are really about God always having space for everyone to fit, God always having a place, a task for everyone to be engaged in. And I think that's something that we need to live into as well. So I hope you find today's reflections fruitful for yourself, and we will see you again next time.